And you're talking about the numbers. You're saying there are so many people here that it would just take too long. But let me ask you, I mean, the Constitution says that everyone who's here is entitled to due process.
Right now, what we know is that when people came into the country illegally, almost 90% of them would not even go to the hearings. So if you're supposed to show up for a hearing and you do not go, what are we supposed to do as a country?
Very quickly, let me just interject.
Well, how much due process was had when people entered the country? Now we're supposed to have due process after they're here, even though they didn't have it when they entered. Kristen Welker, coming off her big Meet the Press interview with Donald Trump, goes after another big Republican, Byron Donalds here. And this man, a lot of times, has great answers, but it's not the greatest thing about him. Do you see that hairline? This brother has such a crisp hairline and hair at probably 40-something years old. I'm jealous. I mean, look at this. I could put a whole billboard on this forehead. It's itsSeanDaniel here. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Filming from South Korea. I'm not on a diplomatic mission. Maybe if you leave enough comments, the Trump administration will put me on a new diplomatic mission like I was in Japan, or if you hit the like button enough. Anyway, let's hear his answers as he combats Miss Politically Correct Kristen Welker.
And joining me now is Congressman Byron Donalds, Republican from Florida. We should also note that he is running for governor in the great state of Florida, the Sunshine State. Congressman, thank you so much for being here.
It's good to be back with you.
It's good to have you back. I know it's a busy time for you, so we really appreciate it. We're going to talk about the president's comments there as well as the economy. But let's talk about that moment when he said, I don't know, when I asked him if he has to uphold the Constitution of as the president of the United States. What was your reaction to hearing that? Do you think he has to uphold every part of the Constitution, including the Fifth Amendment?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. I think what the president was talking about is, yes, he's going to uphold the Constitution. He's taking advice from his legal team, led obviously by the White House counsel, the Attorney General of the United States, everybody working at the Department of Homeland Security, about all of the parameters that they are using to deport illegal aliens out of this country, which is the core of President Trump's victory last November. Let's remember, the American people have been clear that they want criminal illegal aliens, number one, and then illegal aliens overall returned to their home countries. Donald Trump is fulfilling that promise. Now, I think to the broader question in this entire situation, is it okay for the previous administration to abuse the border security laws, abuse asylum, abuse temporary protected status, open up the country to millions of people, and then hide behind due process where it would take us 15 years to actually process people back out of the United States?
And you're talking about the numbers. You're saying there are so many people here that it would just take too long. But let me ask you, I mean, the Constitution says that everyone who's here is entitled to due process. So I understand there are big numbers that you are talking about and that the president is dealing with. But if you're going to follow the Constitution, don't you have to follow what it says by letter and law?
Well, I think first, the other thing is you have to look at this. When you come in, let's say on an asylum package, that is at the discretion of the administration. The administration is now saying, you know what? We are going to have a legal detainer for you to be deported, and you are going to be removed from the United States. That's under the premise of how you came in. Second thing, every illegal alien that came here, the first thing they did is they broke the law coming into our country. They broke the law. Let's level set here. That's what they did. So there is an orderly process that the president and his team is going through. They're not just rounding up people and dropping them out of the country. That is not true. Everybody that's been deported to this point has had a legal deportation order executed by the president's administration.
But in this case, in the case of Kilmer Abrego Garcia, the administration said it was an administrative error. And in 2019, an immigration judge issued an order that's still in effect that he should not be deported back to El Salvador. And I guess this goes back to the question that I was asking to President Trump. Do you think that everyone, citizens and non-citizens, are entitled to due process?
Well, first and foremost, let me be clear with you. When it comes to due process, that is a privilege reserved for American citizens. When people are in our country illegally, there is a semblance of due process, but not nearly at the level of a United States citizen, of an American. There are two different standards. You come to America, you are a guest in the United States. That privilege can be revoked. And a lot of these illegal aliens were not guests. They showed up at the southern border. Joe Biden abused our laws, ignored our laws, and let them in.
And yet,
so what are the American people supposed to say about that?
Well, the Constitution.
before we hear Kristen Welker's explanation, her argument from the Constitution about why these people here due process, let me make a case for you guys. Why would they need due process if it's legally tracked that they decided to come into the U.S. from the southern border? Their name is listed as they've been granted asylum case from the southern border. And then they have a history where a deportation hearing was had, and they were granted in that deportation history, like 90% of the people who have these hearings, they are deemed to have an order for deportation, meaning their asylum case is not valid. They are ordered to deport. They've had that due process. What other due process do they need? Secondly, when you come to the U.S., you come to a border, you fly in from Germany, you fly in from Morocco, wherever, and you land in New York. You get to the border. Let's say you have a e-visa, it's called, electronic visa, or you have a real tourist visa you got from an embassy. When you land, the border officer can decide whether or not you have a quality reason to come to the States or you don't in their eyes, and they can reject you regardless of the visa. Now, with that, are you allowed to have a due process where you get to have a hearing, you get to make your case? No. You have this one officer right there who can say yay or nay to you. You don't get that big of a process. And that's what people who have visas. Now, a lot of times they're let in. It's not that often where they're not let in. But if we don't give a deep due process to people who legally come here to the border with a visa and a border official can say yay or nay to them, why should we have a full-fledged process for illegals who have already had a deportation hearing that says they need to leave? Maybe you guys can use that argument next time you hear this topic with other people. Now let's hear what Kristen Welker has to say in her beautiful explanation.
Well, the Constitution, let me just read you. This is the Fifth Amendment. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces. And then it goes on to say, nor shall any person be subjected for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life, limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So the Constitution says any person, not citizen. And therein lies the debate and the root of my question. Does any person just apply to citizens in your mind, or does it apply to citizens and non-citizens? The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, says it applies to citizens and non-citizens.
Well, let's be very clear. First and foremost, when the framers wrote our Constitution, they never envisioned that there would be an executive that would allow millions of people to come into the country illegally. They never fathomed that. Number two, more importantly, you have a situation right now. Is it okay for any administration to not follow the law, abuse border security laws, let millions of people in, and then hide behind the court system to say, well, now they're here, so now we have to go through a lengthy process? Let's examine this right now. Right now, what we know is that when people came into the country illegally, almost 90% of them would not even go to the hearings. So if you're supposed to show up for a hearing and you do not go, what are we supposed to do as a country?
Very quickly, let me just interject, and we're running out of time, and I still have to get to the economy.
Sure.
To your point about the hearings, does Congress need to work harder to get more funding, to get more resources to the courts so that you can better process people who are here, who are undocumented?
In the one big beautiful bill, there will be dollars provided to the administration to speed up the deportation efforts. I will add that one of the things we have to be very sober about is that the gravity upon which all these people have been brought to our country, it is not physically possible to hire that many judges and process them out of the country. This is why you cannot have open borders to begin with.
Okay.
And another great point that he made is that the founders, Constitution writers, didn't really imagine that we would have such an invasion where laws were thrown out the window to begin with. And it is really interesting for those of you guys who deal with people on a daily basis, who get in arguments about this with people like I had. I literally was talking to two idiotic, super liberal Europeans yesterday who kept arguing to me about due process out of nowhere. You guys can remember, just in one simple statement, like Byron did here, well, how much due process was had when people entered the country? Now we're supposed to have due process after they're here, even though they didn't have it when they entered? You can always use that base logic system. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to accept it, but you guys can use that without getting to a bunch of legal jargon if you get in arguments.
Let's move on to the economy. Sure. I have to get your reaction to the president effectively saying that kids can have or should have $2 and not $30. They should have fewer pencils. Do you think that's the right argument for the president to be making about his tariff policy?
Look, I think the argument the president is making is that overall, if you look at where we are, prices have come down. Even the GDP read that just came out that showed a contraction, you know why that is? It's because of the federal government contracting. That's a good thing. Private investment in the economy year over year is up over 20%. Personal consumption in the economy year over year is up over 2%. So individuals are consuming. There's private domestic investment in our economy. The federal government is shrinking. Yeah. But when it comes to goods, prices are coming down. If people make purchasing decisions on what they're going to do with their own resources, those are their personal choices.
As I just noted with the president in the interview, of course, some prices are going up. The economy shrank. As you know, the stock market has been volatile and fears about inflation are increasing. Let me just play you something very quickly that Republican strategist Karl Rove had to say. Get your reaction on the other side. Take a look.
I thought it was really problematic when he said, well, you know what? The kids, those little girls at Christmas, they don't need $30. They can do it, too. And if they have to pay a couple more bucks for them, OK. Well, it sounds like Mr. Scrooge. And the ordinary American is like, wait a minute, I thought you were on my side.
Is Karl Rove right?
No, I don't think Karl's right for a number of reasons. Number one, first of all, it's still within the first 100 days. We just passed it the other day. The president is working on his entire economic agenda. Lower tax prices, lower taxes, we're going to take care of that across the street. More business investment is already happening right now. You have to let the president work through the trade policy. Now, if you're going to talk about the words he used around dolls or strollers, tell every parent out there that's driving their kid back and forth to summer camp, starting in a month or so, back and forth to practices like my wife does with my son, gas prices are down across the United States. That is a boon to the American consumer, a boon to families. It will help parents afford the necessities and the desires of their kids.
Very, very quickly, because we're out of time. How long do you think Americans are going to give this president? He's talking about a transition period. How long are they going to be patient? We've been talking to his supporters who say they do want relief right now.
Well, the American people are with President Trump. He won a mandate for a reason.
But
the
how long
previous
does he have?
administration
How long
raised
does he
prices
have?
over 4 years. We're going to get all this stuff done over the next several months, and it will kick it into this economy. By the time we hit Thanksgiving, we'll be rocking and rolling.
All right. Congressman Byron Donalds gave me a timeline. I'm going to hold you to it, and we'll have you back.
You see how happy she is that he gave her a definitive timeline of the next few months. That's one of the main things they want to get on record so they can criticize Trump and everybody else if that timeline does not come to pass. Now, with her question, I have a question for you guys. How much time do you think voters like me and you, who waited 4 years of going through BS, of going through an invasion, how long do you think we're going to give Trump administration to work things out, get tariffs in order, get the economy in order? Let me know in the comments right now. Because I believe, at least personally, I'm going to give them so much time. Why? Because I had to deal with 4 years of crazy inflation, a president that had no respect around the world, continually seeing flows and flows of migrants coming in on the news. And even in, for instance, my smaller, decently sized city in South Carolina, I was seeing more and more migrants over those 4 years in South Carolina. So after dealing with that 4 years of insanity that a lot of us were not happy with, I think there's going to be a lot of patience with how much time it takes to work things out, get deportations going, get the economy in order, work through this tariff stuff. This whole panic idea that they try to promote through the media that, oh, we need to see results right away. I don't think all the voters who voted for Trump after 4 years of frustration, that they're not going to be patient. Now, the media is trying to manipulate us mentally to think that we need to be in this frantic mindset, but personally, I don't think that's going to be a problem. And let me know what you guys think. Hope you enjoyed seeing Byron Donalds, in his calm way, try to combat some of the things that Kristen Welker tries to bring up. It's SeanDaniel here. Here's another video for you guys to watch if you want. Like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.